Good morning, everyone. My name is Ed Marcaselli. I'm the Managing Director at BAI, and looking forward to a great conversation about compliance today. I'm going to have my two colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth McManus. I'm with Fifth Third Bank. I'm the Director of Operations and Business Controls for our FinTech Partnerships team.
Hello, I'm Jeff Easley with USAA, and I lead our GRC programs team.
All right. So I'm going to start ladies first.
Okay.
Ladies' honors here. So Mary Beth, tell us a little bit about the role that you play in your organization to give the audience some context.
Sure. So if any of you are familiar with terminology that some of us love and some of us hate, the lines of defense, I'm in the first line of defense. So from a compliance perspective, my team kind of owns the execution of compliance and risk programs.
Jeff?
Yeah, so GRC programs, we're really the technology service provider internally. I do sit in the second line, but business control partners and others in the first line are our primary customers. So we run our GRC system, a core platform, as well as a number of applications that are integrated with that. So our job is to really make sure all lines of defense have the tools and technology they need to get their job done.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with somewhat of a provocative question.
Uh-oh.
And so a lot of times compliance is thought of a cost driver in the business. So why shouldn't organizations just do the minimum in compliance?
Well, I'll take that question
Sure.
first, thanks. So when we think about compliance, I think my ask of the folks in the room, and actually for you to take back to your teams, is to not think about compliance like as a second line function and not think about compliance as like an org structure, but think about compliance as an integral part of delivering your strategy. Just like you could not deliver a solution to your customers without great IT support, without your sales teams being on board, without understanding the financials behind it, you really can't deliver solutions to your clients without strong compliance partnership too. So from that perspective, there like is no minimum. It's you're doing what you need to do in order to support your customer in the right way.
Jeff, how would you describe that in your organization?
Mary Beth and I talked about this a little bit before the session. I'm really on the technology side. So for me, that culture has to be embedded, has to be a part of everything you do. It has to be part of your business. For us, how we serve our members. But I'm really sitting where the rubber hits the road, right? So it's very important that that culture is out there. It's on at the top. It persists. We're all believers in it. When you get down to providing our services, it has to be effective and efficient, right? So kind of where our journey is, we're moving up the maturity curve, trying to get from more reactive to more pro-reactive. And a lot of that has to do with the tools and technology that you have, especially in the first line, to do your job. So there's a lot of great tone at the top. There's a lot of good embedded culture and values within our organization. It's the, it's how do I make that happen, at that front line, helping our members in the moment. What tools and technologies really need to be in place to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. We're certainly focusing on the member, but doing it in a way that's certainly compliant and proactive risk management. So that's really the magic happens, at least for me, and what my team does and where our focus is. So I think we're a little bit less in terms of, is it important or not, or do we see it as a cost or not, more in terms of how do we make sure we do that as effectively and efficiently as possible.
So that was an important point, Jeff, and I want to just follow up with you. To what extent would you describe your culture at your organization proactive versus reactive?
We're definitely coming up the maturity curve. We're more reactive now than we should be. We have been making huge strides and investments and moving to more of a proactive culture. We have the priorities, we have the right tone at the top. It is really coming from senior management. We're spending a lot of time and investing quite a bit to get there. So I don't think it's a matter of the push and the acceptance of that culture. It's when I look at my business control partners inside of USA, they're looking at me saying, we're ready, we want to do this, but, right, this isn't working, can't figure this out. I know we'll talk more in the session about some of those pieces, but you got to have what you need to make it happen. Proactive is operating and proactive, not just saying it. Certainly the operating side is, I have what I need to do, I'm seeing something, I can take action, someone else can take action, it's there and we're moving out on it versus we all say it's important, but if you have an enormous amount of work to do to take that action, obviously that's a hurdle, right? So we really got to push hard to knock those hurdles down so that everyone can actually operate the way they need to operate.
Great. Mary Beth, how would you
Yeah, so I think we're probably like maybe a little bit more up the maturity curve, but we're both proactive and reactive, but far more on the proactive side today. Like things will come up which necessitates a kind of reactive nature to an issue, perhaps a change in direction from a legal perspective or regulatory perspective, excuse me. But from a proactive perspective, we've made a lot of really good and positive strides to think about compliance differently. And again, I'm going to keep going back to this over and over again, but if we think about everything we do is delivering from the customer's perspective and how we support like smart financial solutions for our customers. In order to do that and do it like in a really efficient and effective way, we have to have compliance be a part of even the ideation. So it's not that like I engage at a toll gate, like I engage compliance, I engage my legal partners very, very early on in new product development, in development of new features and functionality, so that we're embedding that thought very early on in the process. And compliance is just a natural part of delivering really great solutions to our clients. What we don't ever want to do is be in that situation where we look at things like so chunked up that we're like, well, this part was product development, I have my idea, now compliance comes in and tells me no, or compliance stops business, right? Like some of you guys are laughing because you've been there before. You may have said it, you may have been the recipient of it, but the reality is if we pull everybody together earlier in the process, we all get to the right solution for our client, and then that creates that more proactive culture just very naturally. And then we react appropriately when something goes bump.
Mary Beth, would you say that instilling this culture of compliance has made your employees more aware of the risks that could happen? If
Oh, absolutely. More aware of the risks and really more comfortable with the risks, right? So I'm sure all of you or most of you are in banking in some area. It's not a no-risk business, right? Like it is risk, but it's about how do you identify it, how do you mitigate it, right? So when you have a culture that thinks proactively about risk, it's really easy for people to raise their hands. On both sides. It's easy for me from a product perspective to raise my hand and say, hey, I think I'd like to try this because I know I'm not going to get somebody on the back from compliance or risk, and I will even say like on the back end, they'll be a part of the ideation with me to say, well, that's an interesting idea, have you considered, right? So then I have a dialogue instead of like these series of one-way conversations that are kind of closed-ended. I have open-ended conversation about, again, how we deliver a great solution to our client, or find out that my idea was really wacky and we can't deliver that, but I get to know fast too, and that's important.
Jeff, what about in your organization? Any positive impacts you've seen with sort of your focus on proactive compliance?
Yeah, I look forward to being further up the curve where Mary Beth is, just to be candid. But certainly the benefits of it I see is, just maybe I'm relating it to my life phase that I'm in, but, better hearing, better eyesight, right? So you can head things off. You're more aware of what's happening. It's part of your everyday decisions. I've resonated certainly with Mary Beth's comment. I've been in product development for a long time at USA before my current role, so I was that guy coming to the big committee saying, hey, we should do this, and they're saying, hey, you're crazy, we should never do that. But that's after enormous amount of energy and time spent,
Yeah.
budget, et cetera. Definitely a inefficient way to do it. And I think I do resonate with her points in terms of let's look down the road earlier. Let's have that conversation as part of everyday conversations, not as a committee that you have to go through. It's just part of the beginning all the way through the process. And I think once you have those capabilities in place, certainly I'm technology focused and putting those in place, that real benefit is you're seeing down the road, you're more aware of what's happening, you have more time to react, to make whether it's product development decisions or operational decisions you need to make ahead of time, in time, to really head off those issues or potential issues that are waiting for you. So it's definitely a benefit.
Now, just to switch gears here, talk about implementing the culture of compliance in your organizations. I'm going to start at the top. And how would you, or could you give us some examples of how your upper management reinforces the importance of compliance in your organization? I'll start off with you, Mary Beth.
Well, there's an awful lot of different ways. First of all is through, Jeff has mentioned the tone at the top, and the tone at the top, those aren't just words. Like, that has to actually be how your senior management lives. And I think through investment in compliance, in business controls function, whatever your organization calls it. But as the organization evolves and is more comfortable with allowing people to come together in a more collaborative way. So I think a lot of it has to do with kind of changing the way we work completely as an organization, and the fact that the organization has a continued commitment to compliance and risk management overall. And we talk about it a lot. We talk about it at executive levels. A lot of our, we have this very formal part of the organization where we have lots of risk management reporting, and it starts, kind of bottoms up and works its way up to the top, and then it comes back down again. I see some of you nodding your heads. You're very familiar with that. So you have these formal areas, but then you also have your interactions with your senior or executive management in your organizations, where you can see and feel the way they make decisions and the way they're willing to make trade-offs. And sometimes when your organization is willing to put an idea on hold until it's fully developed, the way they will make an investment indicates that they're very, very supportive of the compliance function and the need to really integrate it into the organization.
Great. And Jeff, at USAA, how does upper management reinforce that?
Yeah, I think, echoing Mary Beth a little bit, if the CEO and the leadership are not talking about it, it's just not happening, right? It's just the law of large organizations. So whatever is the conversation at that level, certainly the rest of us are paying attention and knowing where the priority is. So we really have that in place at USA. We talk about that quite a bit. We've done a lot of changes, implemented some programs to reinforce. And so, and again, I was talking about more of the action level and technology, and certainly that's where I sit. But we have quite a bit of that messaging happening right now. It's a very high priority for us. I think at USA is interesting because we've been powered by our focus on the member of the military and their families for 97 years now, and that's just our wide open business case. We take care of the member, they take care of us. And I think this exercise and us moving into more of a proactive space is definitely an and exercise, not an or exercise. We need to maintain that focus, but certainly shore up our proactive risk management capabilities and actions at USA. So that's one thing that's certainly on our minds every day recently. And I think one thing I just wanted to add was, a lot of us, certainly USA, probably this is an American thing. We're used to keeping score, knowing where we're at, how we're doing, when we're going to get there, right? We typically take a big program and break it up and saying, okay, Jeff's going to try and get this first piece done, then Mary Beth, then Ed, kind of thing. This one is a little harder for us, and certainly I welcome conversations around anyone at this conference on how you guys are handling it at your large firms or any firm. But it's a matter of, there's not a clear scoreboard that says you're doing this well, and if you get a few more touchdowns, you'll win the game, kind of thing. But we are really trying to break it into something that the 34,000 employees at USA can really get around in terms of our progress and how well these investments are playing out, and how well we're executing our plans. I think that's an important aspect of how we see ourselves really in the work and how well we're progressing. I know it's a regulatory environment. It's not necessarily that cut and dry, but that's what we're used to. So our culture is really trying to turn that into something that people understand, get their arms around, and see that sort of dedicated and clear progress in how we're moving out to move to that proactive risk management space.
So, Jeff, as a follow-up, how would you characterize or describe how compliance is managed? Is it decentralized or a centralized organization or a hybrid?
It's more of a federated model. I think it's centralized, but certainly where I sit is in the Chief Risk Office. It all rolls into our Chief Risk Officer. But certainly we have a federated program where each of USA's major lines of business has a Senior Risk Officer, Chief Compliance Officer. They spend much of their time with the leaders of those businesses, but federated back into our Chief Risk Officer. So I think whether it's risk and compliance or process improvement or any of these sort of large programs, you're going to have your back and forth, right? You're going to sort of approach different guardrails. I think we've settled on a pretty good federated model in terms of risk and compliance, and I think you always have a little bit of a pro and a con based on which model you choose, but it's just something that you have to manage.
And how would you describe it at your organization, Megan?
I'll tell you, it's interesting because the way I would have described it yesterday is a little different than the way I'm describing it now. And that's because we had a session earlier this morning around the ROI of compliance. So I am stealing some of my colleagues' comments from that. But so I want to tell you is from a regulatory perspective, it's a decentralized model. So we have a team that reports to our Chief Compliance Officer that reports to the Chief Risk Officer. So, and we have the defined second line of defense, and then we have risk and compliance management in the first line. And that sounds, and what we talked about this morning, and I think it was such a great observation, is that sometimes that sets up friction inside the organization, and that also sets up ways for people to kind of like poke holes in your model, right? Because it's like, well, does the first line really own it? What is the second line doing? So I'd like to take that like official answer and put it on the side and say that risk management or compliance is very decentralized. If we're really moving up the maturity curve, then everybody owns it. So it should be in every seat, in every job, in every part of the organization, like no questions asked. Will I go to the second line for certain levels of expertise? Absolutely. The people who kind of live and breathe and think about compliance like very narrowly, yes, but then I also need those people to help me deliver those really great solutions to my customer every day. So if I think about my job, if I think about my organization from my customer's perspective, I would hope that what my customers and shareholders think is that compliance lives in every person who is inside our organization. That's just a little hard sometimes to explain from a regulatory perspective, but that's when I think we're really getting it the way that we should.
Great. So I'm going to shift gears one more time here, and just like your customers are changing, and also the mix of your employees are changing in terms of whether it's impacts in terms of the way we live our lives or technology. How is your organization, Jeff, dealing with how technology change is impacting compliance and how your employees keep updated using technology?
Yeah, it's a huge focus for us. Certainly for my team, it's about delivering in USA's case, that member service that our members expect and are used to, without over-encumbering, all the folks that make that happen. So the pure technology play for me, I think there's a couple of phases in this. Certainly where we are, it's make sure all the building blocks are firmly in place. Our culture of compliance is firmly rooted, and everyone is fully aware and knows what to do. I think that next phase would be scalability. How do we make sure that it's systemically part of what you do? Just everything you think of, every service you provide, it follows it along. And I think the technology is really the focus in terms of, make sure that's highly efficient and scalable, right? So, extreme scenario, which we won't do, but just for conversation, would be you're trying to help a member on the phone, but you are trying to make sure you're compliant in all kinds of crazy manual ways. Obviously, that would get in front of what you're trying to do. That would probably frustrate the member, because it feels like to the member you're really just a compliance company, not a financial services company, right? So we're very keen on making sure that scenario never plays out, and a lot of that has to do with the tech and the way we deploy it, from very advanced tech to just very basic, blocking and tackling in terms of systems integration. Make sure you have what you need if you're on the first line providing a service to our members, not something that's getting in your way, but something that's just a part of how you do it. So that'll be a major focus, in the next phase, past the building blocks that we're working on now.
And Mary Beth, and you?
So when I think of technology and compliance, I think it helps and hurts. So there are aspects of technology that actually help us from a compliance perspective, whether it's certain reg tech software, it's automating testing. There's a variety of different ways in which technology actually helps us be far more precise. Technology can also help us deliver those solutions to our customers in a more efficient and effective manner. And then there's all of the innovation that's happening from a fintech perspective. That is, those smaller organizations, they're very nimble. They can think about the solutions to the customers in different ways. Onboarding those organizations and their ideas and making sure that we're kind of living to all of the regulatory expectations adds a different level of complexity. But it's kind of part and parcel of how the world is evolving. So we have to make sure that we're managing and thinking about technology from a variety of different lenses. And then I'm sure you guys all have different tools in your tool bag that you use, right? So you may have if you're thinking about it from a third-party perspective, you've got a vendor management team or a vendor risk management team that's helping to evaluate to make sure that what you're buying is really what you thought you were buying and it isn't going to get you in trouble down the road. Or you actually have like your IT staff that works very closely and understands the type of technology that you're bringing into the organization. So kind of long answer, but I think technology definitely helps what we do from a compliance perspective, makes it more efficient, and then on some avenue it adds a little bit more complexity to it.
And I found it was very interesting prior to us walking out here. Mary Beth was relating a story about either your daughter or your daughter's friend had an incident with some fraud in her savings account, and she had never been into an actual branch before. And
that's embarrassing. It was my daughter.
But I think she found the associate was so knowledgeable when she walked in the bank, was able to really get right to her issue and explain what she could do and how she could solve her problem. And unfortunately, not everybody's going to come into the branch. And so how we use technology to basically update our associates, employees with the latest information is extremely important. How do you achieve that at your organization?
Oh gosh, I'm probably not the expert on that. With people who are a whole lot smarter than me. So the situation that Ed's talking about is my daughter called one afternoon, and I don't know if any of you have children who are adults now, but at some point, like, she doesn't want to talk to me, and then she called it and she said, my savings account has been drained. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I said, well, what have you done? Like, who have you talked to? I don't know what to do. Like, she said, I'm looking online and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, honey, just go to the branch and they'll be able to help you. They'll be able to guide you. And so what happened was she was looking online, and it may have been an element of panic, but it also may have been that I know I'm guilty of this, you all probably aren't. I tend to speak in bank speak. So if I write something, I write it like a banker, and I might not write it like a customer. So however it was drafted, she was having a hard time, but she went to the branch, she walked in, talked to someone, found out what happened. She said, I instantly felt so comfortable with what she told me to do. She gave me the forms. I knew how to, this organization, or the bank that she's with, they still have to fax in forms for fraud. And she said she took care of all that for me. And so, in terms of like, how then do you make it easier for your customer to self-service? I think it's thinking about the problem from the customer's perspective, not from the banker's perspective. And this again gets back to when we think about what we do, trying not to think about it from a line of defense perspective or a line of business perspective, but from a customer need perspective. But this is the guy who probably does it really well, because like his whole organization is mobile and virtual.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So here's a great point, especially as we relate it back to risk and compliance. So, typically in my career, it's been, product development. I led our remote deposit capture product line creation and all that an embarrassingly long time ago, but 14 years ago, I'll say it. But what the culture is, or has been for a long time, it's all about them, it's all about them. And certainly for USA, our members, very mobile, they change stations quite a bit, all over the globe, doing what they do to protect us. And I think the branch method, the branch sort of approach, and all the products that come through that, certainly they appreciate, but they really appreciated the put that in my pocket, right? Don't make me go do something I don't need to do if I can just take care of it. I got a lot going on in my life, and I know we all do, but certainly they are much more mobile than general population. So one thing I was putting together, Ed, as you're asking that question, is we typically had a sort of a front office, make their lives better, be there for the member, and more of a back office, just take care of fraud and risk and compliance, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly I think there's a huge opportunity in the story Mary Beth told in terms of, that making their lives easier, helping them with situations that we're all going to be experiencing from time to time. I don't know how many credit cards I've had to get reissued over the year. Just my wife and I are pretty boring. We don't do any kind of crazy website surfing, but for some reason, that still happens from time to time. And we don't, as a firm, and maybe at your firms too, we don't really make that into a product or a service. It's just something we take care of. But if it were, like in your daughter's case, something that was exposed to her saying, hey, we got it. Certainly digital is nice, but she doesn't have to come into a branch or talk to someone. It's all there. Here's what happened. We think, you probably should shore up your passwords or whatever the outcome is of the situation, or don't go to that restaurant anymore. But imagine if that was exposed to you, and you get that peace of mind as a product or service versus it's just something most banks, whatever fraud departments take care of for you. So I think there's, on our way to making sure we're proactive risk managers, the productization of some of that stuff is very exciting, and certainly, any of our customer bases would be happy to have that service as a part of what they do to bank with you.
And just kind of building on a little bit what Jeff said, is it feels like it's a need for a really strong feedback loop across the organization, right? So if we want to make sure that technology is really working for us, we want to make sure that from our risk and compliance functions are all working. It's that constant feedback loop that needs to exist to make sure that we're not getting siloed, and that we actually are meeting our customers' needs and meeting the customer where the customer is, as opposed to where we think they should be.
Great. Well, with the time I have left, I want to poll the audience for a couple of questions. I think we have time for one or two questions if anybody has.
I'm a USA member, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your membership.
I don't think I've ever seen a more member or mission-driven organization in my life, and I've been down there twice and visited. And I wanted to ask about what sort of precursors in an organization sort of need to exist company-wide, not just in compliance, that make good foundations to build a compliance practice on top of.
Thank you. That's where I was saying before, it's an and statement, right? We have grown. We're proud of that. We're serving more members, but that comes with congratulations, you have higher standards to meet. So that's really the and that we are absolutely dedicated to keeping in place versus the or, right? We know it's tempting from a strategy perspective to say, hey, this is a problem over here, solve it, go all in on this. We can't let go of who we serve and why we serve them. So again, openly, that's where we're dedicated today, to make sure that you and other members get the service you deserve in our viewpoint and that you come to expect, while also making sure that everything is ticked and tied. We're operating the business that's, the proactive risk management cultures is embedded in what we do. We're still here to serve you. That's still why we exist. It's a matter of making sure that our service reps, member service reps as we call them, are armed, able to continue providing that service, while at the same time the technology and all the other capabilities are there for them to ensure that compliance and proactive risk management is shored up. A couple of examples, the culture for us is just, who we are. It's what we do. It's what we talk about every meeting we're in. We start with our mission, not in terms of an actual mission in combat theaters and those kinds of things, but for us, it's, are we doing what we need to do to serve those who serve? And doing that is important. It's the matter of, all the other things that need to be in place so that we can continue doing that without taking away from, what you come to expect. My extreme example was, now we just, the worst thing we could do is just sort of badger you with all the questions and everything else we need to do. What are the technologies that we can know, kind of like the example with Mary Beth's daughter? We already know what it is. We already have that data. Let's arm that member service rep who you're talking to, not make them burden you with getting more information that we already have. So that's a real challenge for us, but it's a great question. I appreciate you asking that.
Well, there was a few questions that we have time for one more question, and few questions submitted prior to the start of the conference. So I'm going to pick one of those.
Okay.
So Mary Beth, I'll start off with you. What is the biggest compliance challenge that your organization is facing today?
I think the biggest compliance challenge is when the folks who sit in the compliant organizational structure don't view themselves as integral to the strategy of the bank. When compliance thinks of itself as a group that sits out to the side as a part of, instead of being a part of the delivery of the solutions to the customer, I think that's the biggest challenge. Okay. Because that sets up walls. It that's when the process really slows down. When we think about ourselves in silos instead of thinking holistically how we support our clients and our customers and how we actually deliver a solution to them. Once those walls come down, then all those challenges that sit around it, because you know what you're anchoring yourself around. Jeff's really clear that you anchor yourselves around your members. And you lead off thinking about and talking about the members. Organizationally, if we don't really think about the customer and we don't think about the problem that we're solving for the customer, then we think about it as my product and your compliance regulation. Well, that's silly, because we work for the same company and we serve the same customer. We should think about it from that perspective. So it really starts, though, with each one of us being willing to kind of come to the middle, put your ego aside a little bit, and think very squarely about the customer.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have, and so I'm going to leave it there, but I wanted to thank both Jeff and Mary Beth for offering us some insight into how they're handling the compliance challenge, and I look forward to enjoying the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.